I'm Jessica Broughton. I'm the founder and lead designer of KonaCoco.
Tell me a little bit about you and what brought you to Singapore.
I've been an international gypsy for the last 20 plus years. Yeah, so born in Australia, went up in the corporate world. Actually, I studied interior design at university and got totally bored with that. Never worked in it, was majoring in furniture design at university, was totally and utterly convinced that design was my pathway. Basically, I was headhunted to manage somebody's internet company. I got, of course, addicted to earning the salary.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, like, how old were you roughly around that time?
I was really young because I didn't go through the many years of university. I went through 2.5 years of uni and then fell straight into managing companies at a pretty young age. So I think I was 22 when I had my first general management position of 2 different companies. My career just took off straight away, and I just very quickly got I just became hungrier and hungrier for experiences, like life experiences, and really wanted to experience different cultures and stuff. And I just started to find Australia quite close-minded. The only way forward was for me to go overseas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went overseas on your own?
Yeah. Well, I had a boyfriend at the time, but I had also planned to go away regardless of whether I had a boyfriend or not. It just so happens that he decided to come too. And so I actually moved to London.
Was that a bonus, or were you hoping that he wouldn't come? You're like, damn.
I was kind of hoping that he didn't come. But yeah.
You're like, I kept dropping hints and he just kept following me.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that.
Okay.
I didn't have a job to go to, and like that was part of the excitement for me. I guess I'm a risk taker.
Yeah.
I got stuck into the corporate world, worked in telcos, all of that sort of stuff, had an absolutely wild time, was traveling overseas every month. And that was really fun, and sort of in and out of, some fairly decent, chunky relationships. Mm-hmm. And then by the time 8 years rolled around, I also felt like I needed a change from London. I was single, and I'd been single for 2 years.
And ready to mingle.
So yeah, I moved myself to the Middle East. I was like, damn this, I haven't had a proper expat experience. I'm going to go and have a proper expat experience, meaning that I was always in a culture where the language was very familiar and the culture was very familiar, and it didn't feel like, I'd really gone and expanded my horizons properly. So I took a job in Qatar. After 4 years working in the Middle East, I then decided that I'd had enough of that. Lots of very strange experiences working as a single woman in the Middle East. Moved myself to Singapore with a fistful of cash.
Were you working did you move with a job?
Nope. Decided that I would turn up and...
Flying by the seat of your fancy pants.
Yeah. Flying by the seat of my fancy pants again. Basing myself out of Bali, but still getting contract work in Singapore and Hong Kong whilst I built my own boutique retreat on an island in Indonesia. I was always a bit of a free spirit, and I needed that to feel happy.
Yeah.
Change when I need to and not be boxed in by any situation. I was going backwards and forwards between Singapore, Bali, the islands in Indonesia, going around on crazy speedboats with nobody that could speak English, with guys with machetes chopping through... I still can't believe I did it, but chopping through land looking for a beautiful piece of land to buy, or, a small island to buy in Indonesia so that I could start to build this boutique retreat of mine. I just have a love of islands. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I grew up on a giant island, but I just feel like it's a place that, you know, I feel the most happiest is on a little island in the middle of the ocean.
So Singapore makes sense.
Singapore makes sense.
So you've done the machetes through the through the tropical rainforests of
Right.
Indonesia.
Yes.
And then at what point in this did you think I need to make a switch?
When I thought that I had to hit pause was a really definite fork in the road. So I met who's now my husband 6 weeks after landing in Singapore.
Yeah. Sorry, this is torture.
So I was literally living out of a suitcase at a friend's house. Started to become quite obvious to me that this was a serious relationship, you know, and I started to sort of think, oh, not sure about disappearing onto a remote island by myself. That's not exactly the way to nurture a relationship. The fork in the roads was when he proposed. And I guess
Damn forks.
Damn fork it?
When you were kind of going through all those experiences,
Mm-hmm.
you were basically here, I guess, kind of like on your own. And then I know you have your own thriving business, but at what point did you, or should I say, did you at one point become a trailing spouse and all?
I did become a trailing spouse almost overnight. Like my plans were switched off.
Yeah.
And then I was left on a temporary visa in Singapore, kind of expecting to stay with Jonathan, and suddenly I became his spouse. So he had to apply for visas for me. Everything became tied to him, even though we weren't married yet. And you know, like everything suddenly, I went from being very independent to kind of slotting into this sort of legal and operating structure under his life. It's just the way that it had to be, being an expat. So yes, I very much became a trailing spouse. And with that brought its own issues, which were quite significant actually, you know, because I found it incredibly difficult to work. I job hunted like crazy and really put myself on the line for years actually. And so I had a baby.
Is it okay to say it's the old cliche?
Before I moved to Singapore, I heard that when you move to Singapore, you will have a baby. That's just what you do. I was told that there was nothing else to do there except have family life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been great. It's been great to start a family here.
That's part of the life cycle anyway. You know, you're of a certain age, certain point in your careers, and it's just kind of like the next step.
Right.
You know, when you're not in your home country, you're not surrounded by your friends and family, which is usually like that kind of happy, momentous occasion in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So did you feel that, and maybe I'm kind of adding a spin in that kind of mentally just because we're in COVID right now, so it's hard because we can't travel, right?
Yeah, right.
But do you recall like how you're feeling?
I felt a giant chasm that I was about to have a child, and I couldn't have that really beautiful, intimate period with my mum, especially, and my sister and my brother around. You know, in the really, really early days of having my one and only baby. You know, and I was quite aware that it was going to be my one and only baby as well. And I really yearned to have, you know, my own family around me, and that was really tough.
It's hard. I feel like it takes too long to kind of meet that circle of tight friends that are a support group. There's a lot of superficial kind of mentality that goes on within the expat community. And of course, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a hairstylist, so close enough, right? I wonder how much of that is some people's own insecurity, so they kind of put up a wall. I think it's probably like a I don't want to say sliding scale, but maybe a wave of scale of some people are insecure, so they put this kind of block up.
Do you know the funny thing is though that when I lived in Dubai, it was very different. I found that maybe because the culture was so extremely different to Western culture, I found that it was much easier to make very tight and honest bonds, and people were very loyal, and I had a very tight-knit group. But in Singapore, it still does feel quite different, you know.
But I feel that there's so many assumptions made with women here and expat women within our own community as well. I hadn't lived anywhere else, and I just thought, I'm just going to pick up where I left off in Canada and come here and continue being a hair and makeup artist. I met a couple friends, but just like you were saying, like, it's hard to find those kind of tight-knit group of people. And I found that a little disappointing, and I like to hang out with a bunch of people and meet different people from all different walks of life and cultures. You know, again, it's that Toronto mentality, right?
Definitely.
And going for coffee mornings, and people's focus were like, what does your husband do? It's like why does that have anything to do with me having coffee and trying to get to know you, right? It's kind of a weird...
You see, I was so irked by the whole coffee morning thing, you know, and I worked my butt off just like you had, obviously, in this quite a fast-moving industry.
Yeah.
And then you try and change gears. It felt like I had to try and change personalities to sit down at a coffee morning and do the whole, what does your husband do? And I guess because I was also conscious that I was entering parenthood as well, so I started to try and connect to other women who were having babies. But the problem is, you know, having a baby when you're older, you know, after my career was done, I was happy that it was done, and I was ready to clear the space to have a child. I was so much older than everybody else, you know. Everybody else had, you know, that maybe it was their first expat experience, and I'd already been an expat for 15 years, or you know, maybe there was a 20-year age gap between me and the other person sitting in the coffee circle, and I just didn't feel like I was able to connect. So I very quickly stopped going to those groups because it made me feel even more lonely. And you know what? Like the first time that I've started to find a couple of friends here that really resonate with me was when I really started to, you know, follow my own heart in what I wanted to do. And it was like a process of attraction. And
you had reached out to me just saying, I find what you do interesting, and I'd like to know more about what you're up to in your background. Part of the catalyst for me doing this series was I've had a lot of people that have been expats and locals that have said to me, oh, were you just tired of being at home? And did you just learn hair and makeup just so you weren't bored? Gosh, in Canada, I was on TV, I did makeover shows and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I don't want this to turn about me, but just the lack of getting to know people and to be asked if you were just a bored housewife and taking up like some lipstick, you know, it's like, gosh, thanks for reducing my job.
So is being a trailing spouse as a woman, is it pushing us backwards? There's a subset of female trailing spouses. There are the ones that are happy to sort of succumb to just home life, domestic life, being a tai-tai as they call it here in Singapore. being a kept woman.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of women, and quite rightly so, that are happy to do that. But then there's also women like us who have you know, a lot of experience behind us.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of just natural ambition. We're driven, you know, we're inspired, and we need to be exercising that in order to be happy. There's a proportion of those women that are brave enough to pivot and to try and find a way, any way that they can eke out some kind of existence for themselves,
Yeah.
that allows them to try and get some of that balance back again.
Yeah.
You know, and you see women doing the most amazing things.
Yeah.
And you see women doing the most amazing things.
Yeah.
I mean, it might seem very, very left field of what they used to do, but that's because they've had to completely and utterly transform themselves to be able to do something within the boundaries of where they live.
I think this is where there's some assumptions that are made that I was bored and decided to do hair and makeup, right?
Yeah, right.
But I think it also takes back to getting to know people around you. Just how you were saying too, like there are some women that move here that are completely happy to be a trailing spouse. And I don't want to exclude the men, but I want this to be very female focused, but same with like some men. I'm sure there are some men that, and the numbers are low, like I know it's not as high of a number, but hey, you know, whatever floats your boat and makes you happy, right? And if you want to be the trailing spouse and you're happy to be, you know, managing the household and whatever, like I have no issue with, you know, it's whatever somebody wants to do, right? When I was actively working pre-COVID and I was doing a shoot for a celebrity for a magazine cover, and, you know, we get to set and she says to me, like, oh, are you excited? Are you excited to be here? And I mean, I loved working with her and I love being on set. It's just, you know, it's what I've been doing for 30 years. But it was just kind of like so weird. Like why I didn't understand why she was pushing so much for like, how excited am I to be on set, right? And I was like, yeah, like I guess, like it's, you know, always good to see you. And she was like, oh, but this is your first cover, right?
What?
Yeah. And then it was just kind of like, oh, like no offense to her whatsoever. She's a lovely human. But it was also kind of like, wow, like I've done her hair and makeup quite a few times. And I was actually just surprised. It really took me back, actually, because I thought, you know, not know anything about the person working on you, you know? It's like,
oh, wow.
With me being a hairstylist, you know, I've had clients that are lawyers that are not working or working on something else or not quite to the degree that they were doing back home. And I'm talking about the trailing spouses because I do have clients that are lawyers that are here on EPs or, you know, have PR status. I talk to a lot of my clients about things, you know, like without the camera up, you know, we go through different topics sitting in this chair and I think that's where I'm kind of grateful of being a hairstylist, like learning different things about people and what brings them here and how they feel about what they're doing with their lives.
You're able to lift the veil, if you like. You get that secret pass. What
does your husband do? You know, like obviously that's part of what brings us here, right? What our spouses do. But that's not a definer of who we are. And I think that in my experience of living here, people have really pushed it into, you know, you are the position that you're married to.
Oh, probably finding your people.
Yeah.
Here. So I guess I would advise myself to go about it in a completely different way. Don't believe the hype about all of the expatriate groups and all of that stuff. Head out to a park
Yeah.
And strike up a conversation with more people, just be in environments that were of natural interest to me. What you get out of those coffee mornings is a polarized group of people anyway.
When I had first moved here and I was going to these coffee mornings and definitely talking about what our husbands do, because clearly that's a topic of conversation that people kind of seem to prefer. And I don't know, maybe people move here and they feel a loss of identity, so then therefore they want to talk about their husbands because they kind of don't know where they're at. You get kind of brushed off, and that's the other thing that I found for what I do for a living, which back home has a very strong respect from peers and from just people in general, right? Whereas here, I get treated often like I'm just like failed in school, so she just decided to be a hair and makeup artist. I actually had somebody say that. They said their daughter was not doing well in school and used me as an example. And so it took a while for her to lead up to it, but she was like, yeah, I told her if she's not going to button down and do well in school, she could just be a hair and makeup artist like you. It's like, that's not why I chose my career path, you know?
Yeah.
People seem to not understand the artistic, you know, careers that are out there. And I would rather be doing something where I get enjoyment and fulfillment.
You know, like there seems to be only now a budding respect for creative pursuits.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also like creative thinking that you can pull into the corporate world and
all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it.
Yeah.
But in the corporate world, it's not called creative.
What's it called?
Strategy.
Well, on that note, speaking about creative, I think we can take a little travel over to your studio so we can see all of your designs.
All right.
Excellent.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Sorry, I've never had a car in Singapore.
I just find it just gives you so much independence, and, you know, being a busy person, you can just pack so much stuff into one day.
I like getting in and out of taxis because I can take all of my gack right up to where I need to be versus trying to find parking and then traipse around.
For me, it's about leaving my crap in a car and being able to come back and forth and do many different deliveries in a day. We're in the KonaCoco showroom. This is where I base myself to do absolutely everything from design to administration to escaping from my 5-year-old to you know, doing private shopping appointments. Kona means lady in Hawaiian. Coco obviously has some luxury connotations to it, but island connotations as well. So KonaCoco, the name, the brand was born. And it's really about creating versatile designer, quality designer clothing for women living in warm climates.
Jessica, tell me, so here we are with a mix of your latest collection, right? Up into one of your first pieces.
Yeah, that's right. So I started off with a really free-flowing aesthetic. This is one of my first pieces I made out of dead stock fabric, which means kind of leftover fabric that, you know, other designers don't use. And, you know, this is all out of my upcoming collection. This is about to be released, and I'm working a lot in sustainable fabrics as well, so a lot in tencels and cottons and things like that. From my own designs, I'm quite a selfish designer, so I tend to design things that I practically would want in my wardrobe, and then I also really listen to my clients. This is really the social conscience and the environmental conscience that I've developed since being in fashion, playing a role in trying to develop more sustainable practices. So whilst this is still an infant brand, it's supposed to be a more kind of long-term project. Permanent residency in Singapore, it's like this rare as hen's teeth lottery. It's how it's described amongst expats, but we were really lucky enough to get it in 2017, and the benefit of that is that it suddenly untethers you to be able to run your own companies, and you can I guess have a lot of those restrictions around doing what you want to do and what you need to do as a trailing spouse. That sort of ceases to exist.
I know, coming from Toronto myself, there's a lot of support from the government and just community. So do you find that you get that here as an artist and a designer? Is there some things like that available for you here?
Actually, I find the government is incredibly supportive of small businesses. There's just an incredible amount of massaging of small business that goes on here, which I'm lucky enough.
Sensual massaging?
I wish. I wouldn't classify the Singapore government as a sensual masseuse. I've seen a lot of amazing expatriate designers and amazing expatriate brands here with changes in visa restrictions, having to wind their business down or even close it down because of a visa restriction. So I've got sort of survivor syndrome where I'm watching a lot of my friends and other kind of fellow designers actually suffering at the hands of governmental changes, fallout of many talented people that have started to spread their wings, and now those wings are clipped. I think it's results in a lot of unhappiness and homesickness.
Well, I think too, when you're in a community where you don't feel supported, right? That's hard. Which I guess you could have that same feeling back in your home country, but when you're not in your home country and you just kind of feel that lack of support, it's hard to kind of keep smiling, right?
Definitely. Which I think is why traditionally a lot of people leave their home country and they eventually return to their home country. I can imagine the coming home is a result of a lot of that craving of not only their familiar community and their support network, but also the freedoms that you get with being a citizen.
With being a trailing spouse, as we talked about earlier, is just not having your friends and family, having momentous life experiences like having children, and even with COVID, right? We don't have the support of our family. It's kind of maybe a small circle of friends that you can kind of consider family.
If we were at home, the stadium behind you would be full of people cheering and clapping and screaming for you.
Yeah.
But being an expat, the stadium has maybe got one or two people sitting up in the seats, and they're shouting and screaming the loudest they can. But that's the level of energy of support that you're able to get as an expat. I would love to either go and do the island project or move back to Australia, because I would love my little girl to grow up in a lot more kind of natural, outdoorsy, freer environment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Wrestling with crocodiles.
Wrestling with crocodiles, shaking spiders out of her shoes, all of that sort of stuff. I still think of Sydney as being my forever home, and it's where my family is. The same home that I grew up in is still there. I want to get back there before all of that disappears.
Yeah.
And just to feel that network again, I want to have my stadium full.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sick of having just a couple of people in my stadium, even though they're amazing people. I want a full stadium shouting and screaming for me.